Without further ado, I think we'll kick off. So, super excited to have Michelle Davis here today. She's going to be giving a great talk on developing acceptance pathways, integrating AI into research development workflows. Just very quickly, in terms of an agenda for today, I'll briefly go through introductions, tell you a little bit about who we are, tell you a little bit about Michelle, but I'm going to let her do most of the talking today. She's going to run through roughly a 30-minute talk, and we'll save a bit of time for Q&A at the end as well, so that you can ask any questions that might have come up. We also received some of your questions as part of the sign-up form, so we can go through some of those as well. Great. I'm Tomer. I'm one of the co-founders at Atom Grants. We've been running this webinar series. I think a lot of familiar faces here, for over a year now. And our whole goal with this webinar series is to kind of create educational materials for the research development and sponsored programs community, research administration. The company I've been developing is an AI-powered grant search engine. We support universities all across the US with finding more funding opportunities and finding collaborators for research as well. I'll talk a little bit more about what we do at the end. But yeah, super excited to have Michelle here today. Michelle, I'll let her introduce herself more formally during her talk, but just very quickly, we've been talking with her for a while. She's an amazing research development officer at the Texas A&M AgriLife Research Center, and she is an expert in strategic initiatives, and she's going to give us an amazing talk about her experience with AI in research development. And without further ado, I will pass over to Michelle. Michelle, if you want to share your screen, you can probably introduce yourself far better than I can.
Thank you very much, Tomer. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for inviting me here today. I want to say good morning or afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. I'm Michelle Davis, and I'm a Research Development Officer with Texas A&M AgriLife Research. And like many of you, I kind of live in that space where strategic planning meets practical reality at Texas A&M. My field of research is in acceptance in emerging technologies, and I do a lot of adoption and use assessment for emerging technologies in AgriLife and Texas A&M broadly. So let's get into it here. In this space and for this presentation, I'd like to talk to you about something that you're probably already thinking about, which is how artificial intelligence and or technologies align with your workflows. But in this particular storytelling, I'm not going to be here to talk about any specific tools or to tell you that AI will solve your problems or convince you that you need to overhaul everything you're doing. What I'd like to share is more of a pathway or a practical use approach to technology adoption. It's something that respects the professional judgment that you bring to your work and acknowledges the very real concerns that risk and compliance, and gives you kind of a way to think about where AI and technology acceptance in the form of tools might genuinely help reduce some of the administrative burden that we tend to carry in our workflows. My goal is really simple. So by the end of our time together, I'd like you to walk away thinking, okay, I can see how we might try this in my office or department, and it feels really doable. So that not someday or not in some idealized future state, but implementable within your context. All right. So I want to start with this quote from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. artificial intelligence is increasingly being integrated into nearly every sector of the economy and society. NIST is what NIST is saying matters because they're a standards body, not just a promoter. Their focus is on risk management, trustworthiness, and responsible development. Now, I know that we've all heard versions of this statement, but here's why this matters for us specifically. AI is no longer sort of a future consideration. It's already here, and then our faculty are using it, and we see that our students are using it, and sometimes within our own teams, members tend to be quietly using it, whether it's experimenting with it or pulling it into the workflow themselves. The question isn't really, should we engage with these tools anymore? It's how do we engage with them responsibly? And how do we integrate them in ways that align with our institutional policies while preserving that professional accountability and improve our work instead of creating new problems? So before we go any further, again, I want to be very clear about the framework and what it is and what it isn't. So this is intentionally tool agnostic. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that you need to subscribe to a particular platform or that there's one perfect solution. The technology landscape changes way too fast. And honestly, what works in my environment isn't necessarily going to work in yours. So what I'm offering is a function-focused workflow. So let's review the work that we do, the tasks and workflows and pain points, and consider where these capabilities might support those functions. The emphasis is on where AI or technology tools help and what tool you should think about considering incorporating. So that decision is yours, and it's based on your institutional policies, on your budget, your team's capacity, and your risk tolerance. So I'm just here to help you think through the where and the how in that structure. This approach is really deliberate. I've seen way too many conversations about AI and technology tools devolve into debates about which chatbot is better or whether a particular tool is safe. Those conversations have their place, but they're downstream from the more important questions. What are we trying to accomplish? What are the boundaries? And what does responsible use look like in our context? So we move through this framework and we keep this lens in mind. We're building a mental model for decision making, not a checklist of tools to adopt. So let's talk about AI adoption is really hard because acknowledging the challenges is the first step towards addressing them effectively. The integration of AI into research development workflows isn't just a technical challenge, it's sort of a people challenge. We're dealing with resistance to change, which is completely understandable when you've spent years building expertise, when your workflows really work. So we're dealing with a need for training, and who has time for that when we're already stretched so thin? And we're dealing with very legitimate concerns about data privacy, security, and risk. These aren't barriers to dismiss or minimize. These are real concerns that deserve real attention. And I'm going to tell you, if you're not really asking these questions, if you're not feeling some hesitation about bringing tools into your workflows, you're probably not thinking really carefully enough about those implications because they're real. So acknowledging the challenges isn't about being negative. It's about being responsible. It's about recognizing that thoughtful adoption requires us to address the issues head on and not rush past them in the pursuit of those efficiency gains that everybody's promising. And that's exactly what the framework is, to show you a design and give you that structured way to navigate the process. So the framework has 4 stages that you can take from we're not sure about this to this is part of how we work now. It's designed to follow the technology adoption life cycle, taking into consideration the key drivers of acceptance that influence use behavior and behavioral intent. The framework follows a stepwise process, which has 4 key components: awareness, pilot, validation, and normalization. It's a progression. So you don't skip steps or jump straight to normalization. The hope is that everything works. You move through the process intentionally, gathering information, testing carefully, validating against your standards, and then and only then integrating into your routine practices. So the first 2 stages, awareness, it's kind of where we're starting. It's more than just, hey, AI exists. It's about educating yourself and your stakeholders and regarding what the tool can do and addressing this sort of misconception and building a shared understanding. This is where you're reading and attending sessions, a lot like this one or similar ones, and talking with colleagues and starting to develop this common language for discussing the tool or tools in context. Then you move to a pilot, and this is where you get your hands dirty with the product or tool, but it's in a controlled and low risk way. You're running small scale trials. Maybe you're testing a specific tool on a specific controlled task. You're gathering feedback from your users and you're learning what works, what doesn't, and what adjustments you need to make before you go any further. And then the key here for the pilot is that it's small and intentional. And you're not rolling AI or technology tools across your entire operation. You're just testing it with one team or a focus group and one specific workflow that you can create a use case so that you're learning before you scale. So next comes validation and normalization, which is where most of the governance work happens. The validation phase is where you ensure that the technology that you're considering meets your standards. Does it align with your objectives? Does it fit within your institutional policies? And does it preserve the professional judgment and accountability that you're specifically evaluating, whether it be a role or a process? It isn't a technical test, it's a governance step. It's asking, is this appropriate for the context? Does this respect the boundaries we need it to maintain? So this step or phase can often take the most time. Only after you've validated and after you're really confident that the tool or approach is sound and appropriate and aligned, do you move to that normalization step. So this is where the technology becomes part of your routine and practice, and where it's no longer an experiment, but it's integrated element into your team's operations, where you have this really clear documentation and you've established the guardrails, and now it's an ongoing evaluation to ensure that it continues to serve you well. And so that's the pathway. And the beauty of it is that you can move through these stages at your own pace and based on your readiness, and context is scalable. So I'm going to pause just there very briefly to emphasize the validation and governance step. And it's not the technical test. What we mean is that for this, and before you adopt a tool or process, you need to define your red lines for what you're looking at. Where will you allow AI or technology to assist? And where must human judgment remain absolute? Where can AI provide suggestions? Where must accountability rest solely with the trained professionals? So in this slide, I just did an example and I based it on a prompt validation versus a workflow validation for a funding opportunity. It's about defining those boundaries. What can the AI do? What can't it do? What's the handoff point where a human must take over? And those red lines aren't intended to be restrictive. They're about clear process. They're to protect you and to protect the institution. And they're to ensure that when you use the AI, you're using it appropriately and defensively. And this becomes part of the playbook and part of your documentation for the users. Okay, enough theory. Let's discuss real world use case that likely it should resonate with many of you, and mostly because many of us are using this part of it already in our funding searches. How much time do you spend scanning funding announcements, reading through RFPs, and trying to match opportunities to faculty expertise? If you're like many of us in the field, it's a significant chunk of your time. So this case example examines how AI can streamline that process, augmenting your work, not replacing your professional judgment, but automating the initial identification and scanning of relevant grants. You free up time and focus strategic work, but you focus on relationship building, proposal development support, and high value consulting that only you provide. So this is what it looked like for us. So on the traditional side, we started with a manual keyword searches in a database, filtering iteratively, and relying heavily on the expertise and experiences to identify relevant opportunities. And that worked, but it was super time intensive. With the AI augmentation, which we introduced upstream early in the process to support this sort of broad scanning and rapid synthesis of opportunities, the AI performs semantic searches across multiple databases, identifying those potential matches and generating very quick summaries. In our workshop, one team added a prompt-based summarization for extracting information from the RFPs as an ad hoc efficiency boost. So that was an additional data point for us. But here's the critical part. Final judgment and recommendations remained with our RDOs, and you're still validating that relevance, checking eligibility and confirming sponsor alignment. The AI is handling sort of the scanning and initial synthesis and getting some high volume repetitive work done, but the humans were still handling that decision making. So all of that authority remained with our human experts. So what did the AI augmentation change? It changed where we spent our time. Instead of manually searching and focusing on that, it changed the scope of our scanning. And it provided more sources. It helped with our capacity. You can respond to faculty inquiries faster, and it helps support our researchers. You can be more proactive and reaching out to relevant opportunities rather than being reactive all the time. But this is important. Again, I fall back on this all the time. The human decision authority was preserved at all stages of the pilot and the review. So it also enabled for our teams to increase coverage. So they were able to monitor more funding sources without increasing headcount. So no additional resources needed to be added, but that they were able to monitor more sources. We had faster turnaround. So when a faculty member said, are there any opportunities in X area, then we were able to respond more quickly with more comprehensive information. We were able to do more fit analysis for them when we had more time. We had improved opportunity matching. So the AI system that uses the semantic analysis were able to identify conceptual relationships rather than just relying on the keyword overlaps. So you might discover, we were, and you might be able to discover those overlooked opportunities that a traditional keyword search misses. And fourth, more time for the high value work. And we found this. We were not spending as much time on the manual searches, but more time on proposal development, faculty consultation, very strategic planning. And the work really moved the needle for institutional differentiation. So we found that we were able to consult on more opportunities with more teams than we had in the past. I've said it. So I just wanted to share some outcomes. So we did pilot this with the AI funding opportunities. We did several workshops, and the data that we got from the participant reported outcomes and observed departmental workflow changes. It's not performance benchmarks, so it's context specific data. But what they reported were feeling more confident in their coverage, seeing more opportunities. They reported faster initial screening, getting through the first pass more quickly. They reported better use of their expertise, spending less time on administrative scanning and more time on strategic evaluations. Challenges were so many challenges, absolutely. Some participants struggled with prompt design, even using with the common language and the agentic tools, learning how to ask the right questions. Some were skeptical at first, and they needed to build trust with the tool and then work through those existing workflows. And then overall, though, the feedback was the tool was actually useful and something that they wanted to continue to use and to get more familiar with. So none of this would have worked without us putting in those guardrails that I talked about. So first of all, the results were validated against authoritative sponsor sources, obviously. Second, the AI outputs were treated as signals or drafts, not final answers. We had to review those. Accountability for the decisions always remained with the RDO. And then, of course, within system guidelines, no restricted data was, no sensitive data, no proposal ready content was put into anything that was not a platform that was an enterprise platform. Okay, now let's talk about the human side of this for a moment and that building of trust. Building trust is very essential for the adoption. It depends less on the tool and more on the confidence of the person using the tool. So, what the research is showing us is that one way to build that trust is through the training and support. So, effective use requires a shared guidance. So, setting that lower barrier training, so the smaller pilots and then training and continued training beyond the use has been very successful. And this is where institutional policies and documentation and internal playbooks have come into play. Handing someone a tool and then saying, okay, we have a tool here, figure it out, hasn't been successful. But providing those additional training steps and support beyond the use of the tool has been. Future of AI tools and research development really does point towards that normalized workflow, clear documentation, intentional trust building. In most of the generalized way, we see that the tools being used thoughtfully, not something that we're constantly debating or experimenting with. So the most successful use cases have been those small trials and then implementing them in sections at the department level. And then the institution continues to pursue a strategic integration in a larger scale. And those practices also enable meaningful improvements in the research workflows because we're able to follow those large institutional implementations and then do small scale pilots with our faculty and our researchers. Okay, key takeaways. First, a shared language for AI use, starting with that neutral, role appropriate language to discuss the technology with faculty, leadership, compliance partners without promoting any specific tools or over promising outcomes. Second, take that stepwise acceptance pathway and use it as a roadmap, providing that awareness, pilot, validation step, very important, normalization. Third, a model for defining AI red lines. So take that governance step and approach for determining where the AI may assist and where human judgment and accountability remains absolute. And then know that the workflow is repeatable. So evaluate where the tool and technology reduces administrative burden in common tasks and preserves professional authority and compliance. And then generalize that or scale it to processes that make sense. And then use this as a foundation or a starting point for documenting AI use, creating internal playbooks, and using it in your practice for your context. Thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Awesome. That was amazing, Michelle. Thanks so much. Cool. Yeah, now's the time for questions. So if you want to come off mic, feel free. Otherwise, I've got a couple of questions that we can run through here that came through as part of the form submission. So yeah, just want to say again, thank you so much, Michelle. And yeah, feel free to come off mute, audience, and ask your questions. Yes, Kate, you can feel free to ask a question.
Hi, thank you. Is the resistance to change coming from research development office directors, or is it coming from the boots on the ground staff? And I was also wondering if you gathered any data about, I don't know how big the team was that you worked with, but I'm interested in seeing resistance to change based on age of the administrator or of the staff member.
Those are really great questions, and in true RDO fashion, I'm going to say it depends. It depends. So resistance to change can come in many different ways. Resistance to change came in some context with the leadership in the specific areas that we wanted to talk to them about opportunity to modify workflows. So if we approached a specific department and said, would you like to modify a workflow, or is this important to you? If we had a conversation, sometimes there was a resistance to change in that area. So sometimes there were multiple conversations that would take place. Usually, in our case, we were invited to various departments in our sphere of areas at AgriLife. We were invited to talk to them about our services and things that we could provide for faculty researchers in context. And usually from those conversations, then we were able to talk to them about implementing tools that would assist them in pain points or barriers to their process. So we were able to have those conversations for the awareness step that we're able to bypass or get past those resistance factors. As to demographics, it's not necessarily about age, because it really has to do with the technology acceptance, direct technology acceptance influence. So generally, it's not necessarily about age that is affecting somebody's ideal for accepting new technologies. It's more about a perceived usefulness, a perceived effectiveness of a product. And if we're able to show that a product is going to be useful and effective, then someone is more likely to adopt. They're more likely to accept it as something that is valuable to their workflow. And so that's more the focus of any of our seminars or workshops that we present, is if we're going to focus on a pilot of a tool, then what we want to do is be able to present a tool that's going to be effective for the specific task that they're having a pain point with.
Awesome. Great question. Anyone else from the room want to? Amir, feel free to come off mute.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about the interdisciplinary opportunities. So wanted to see if you have explored, or what do you think about whether or not the same tool or an expanded version of the tool could be used in identifying two faculty members from different departments that would be able to work together on a particular funding opportunity, which would be something that I'm not suggesting it would replace the personal interactions, but it would basically be a way to think outside the box and bring people together rather than relying on department by department search.
Indeed, Amir. Without naming specific tools, because there are several tools that are in this particular realm that have the AI augmented search features. Many of them also have a networking feature embedded in the tool, that once a opportunity is identified or specific opportunity in a certain research field is identified, depending on how that tool is integrated into an educational system, it allows for connection with faculty members, not only within that organization, but also faculty researchers outside of that organization in that same field, providing an opportunity to network in that science.
Yeah, and I'll just say something as well, because there are a couple of other products out there that do kind of researcher matching as well. Atom, my company, also has developed something that does something similar as well. We're focused primarily on helping you find funding opportunities, but one of the things that we do is we help generate profiles for researchers based off public information. So things like publications, previously awarded grants, directories. And then what we do is we help you automate the process of building out your internal directory. And then furthermore, as faculty start interacting with kind of grant searchers and adding more information into their profiles, we're able to make connections using what's called like a semantic search engine between not only researchers, but also helping build teams around specific funding opportunities. And the way it really works in the background is the AI is just taking the profile, it takes natural language, it turns it into a number, and then it finds essentially the coordinates that are closest to that. And so it's actually really good at creating those, as a research development team, it can be hard when you're in a big organization, right, to keep a track of every single faculty's interest. Some people try to do it through spreadsheets. And so the AI can help kind of take off a lot of that workload and make those connections and give you the space that you need to kind of create those human connections as well. So yeah, it's a great question. Um, I'll just come over to the chat because there are a couple of questions that came through there and read them out. So one from Lydia Baxter Howard, thank you. What were some of the solutions you found most useful for overcoming prompt design challenges, Michelle?
So I'm going to say again, it depends on the context of the AI tools that we were using, but specific to this example for funding searches, we developed workshops that were in-person workshops with a limited number of faculty and staff. We had them bring their white papers or abstracts with them. And then we helped them to develop their searches based on their specific research and their prompts. And we helped them understand how to, within context, develop their prompts for the specific tool. Some tools really rely on the Boolean style searches. Other tools are very easy to pick keyword type searches that are very generalized. And then some tools are more common language specific. So you can key in on just the title of your some of your literature or the title of your abstract, and the tool is able to source information based on that. So we tried to help them sort of broaden the way that they developed their own prompts.
Nice. Lydia says thank you. So I think that did. There's another question in the chat from Meg Sparling. But have you experimented with using AI for any other RD workflows other than funding opportunity searches and collaborator searches, example, proposal development, internal funding competitions, etc.?
Yes, we have designed a couple of pilot testing opportunities for developing agents to review narratives, and those are still in the developmental phase. We haven't gotten through the governance portion of that yet, but we're still working on that. Our institution has an internal system with LLMs that we're allowed to use for narrative reviews. And so we're still working on developing prompts and agents to assist us in using that system for extracting information from NOFOs, and also for developing tools for reviewing narratives. It's now of building agent teams as a pilot for doing as reviews. We read a recent article or heard a recent interview out of the University of Colorado for developing a sort of red team agent system. And so we were very interested in that. So we just now started to try to pilot something like that.
Awesome. Any more questions from the room? And Meg says, interesting, thank you. So, cool. If there are no more questions from the room, I'll just run through a couple of other questions that came through when people were signing up for the webinar. Let's see if there's anything interesting here. Well, likely not. Yeah, maybe around research contracts. Can AI be used for drafting and reviewing research contracts? And kind of, do you have any experience with that?
I have not had personal experience, but I have talked to other research development officers and also corporate engagement officers who have started to test those systems for that purpose. So it is, as I understand it, people are trying to test the system to be able to do that.
Cool. And a question about privacy. So at our institution, we're concerned about the privacy of information our faculty submit to external AI tools like ChatGPT. We have a fully internal Microsoft Copilot AI assistant, but faculty still prefer and submit to external AI tools. Can you discuss the privacy concerns and any suggested actions?
Privacy concerns are very real, and we developed an internal system, an enterprise level internal system that includes the ChatGPT module, GPT 4.1, as well as GPT 5. And also we have a Claude module and several other modules in that internal system. And we now have focused our faculty that direction for those internal modules, so that they can use those for development. I highly discourage external systems use, because it is used for training.
Awesome. I think that's probably it for the Q&A session. Let me just see if there's any more questions in the chat. Yeah, if there's no more questions from the room, I'm just going to quickly share my screen again and we'll finish up here. Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to Michelle for hosting an amazing talk. It was super interesting, and there will be a recording made available of this, which we'll share by email following this. I know a couple of you were interested in also getting some of the slides. Michelle, are you comfortable with us sharing the slides as well?
Yes, of course, no worries.
Awesome. So we'll make a copy of the slides available as well. And as always, this has been hosted by Atom Grants. We've been talking a lot about AI and research development today. We're building an AI platform to support research development teams doing more with less. So if you're looking to try and increase how much funding you're bringing in, increase collaborations between teams, feel free to reach out to me directly or scan this QR code and book a demo. I'm happy to walk you through how we make those connections between faculty profiles and funding opportunities and help you build out your research directory, so that you can kind of build teams around specific strategic goals. So yeah, feel free to book a demo. And just once again, Michelle, thank you so much for an amazing talk. And thank you everybody for your attention today.